me with light holds in it a shadow, not a night, a wall, not a wall. I consider a wise and superior soul higher than any exterior calling. However, it is prudent to view strength, steadfastness as something relative, and to be always aware that there are greater powers beyond them. Also, my situation is surely not one to produce a suspicion that I might be presumptuous. As to my future, I must and will think only with diffidence. This I have learned in 6 years, important years, in which I might have learned something more useful if my head and hands had not been tied. Even if I should be a complete failure, my belief is unshakable that my parents or a divine providence have given me a valuable ability, but on the other hand, there is no remedy against exterior circumstances. My better self does not dwell in this room, and you should try and find it where it really is. Whether here or there, whether this way or that way, we have to follow our inner path, and I do not want to commit a sin by not telling you how much your belief in me helps me. I have to go a certain path, and it can be only this one. Many will not believe in it, will not admire my efforts or my achievements. However, I am determined to earn your confidence ever anew if you remain aware what my possibilities are and where I might fail if something proves an impossibility. About the relationship of a young couple, he wrote, "Just picture to yourself what happens when a young couple finally get together. How long it takes for each to learn the other's love and thus happiness. How many adjustments, how much forbearance, self-reduction, renunciation is needed, and how they have to learn to pry themselves loose of childish self-delusions and vain pride. I know that all this is not the end object, but just in this self-restraint lies a happiness that is powerful and productive, and in complete contrast to gratification, comfort, and satiety," unquote. In the fall of 1923, Neutra finally arrived in New York after 4 years of enervating attempts to get there. I read you now before the intermission, I guess there is no intermission, before the showing of the slides, what he wrote me from New York. "Here I have to eat my way through a mountain with great persistency. It is not only my level-headedness or my will, but also God's will and the dictate of my nature that I must do it. Surely you are right, my treasured friend, that it is a worthwhile experience, and I do not even have a choice whether I want to do it. An inner drive propels me. If there is a special wisdom concerning my career and the linking of fate, I may perhaps find it at the end. Now there is not much to think about but to carry on and follow one's inner dictates. Other people have an easier time of it, I can tell you, and you know it. However, I do not envy anyone, even if success should elude me, because the burdensome fight in itself is worthwhile, and to suffer thirst is what is worthwhile, and not quenching it. Finally, I want before all else gain a little mild wisdom, which tells me what truth is and what it is not, but lets me become aware how love is connected with everything. All the sciences, art, humanity, everything which blossoms out of our brains and grows like a million bizarre novelties or one awful flood," unquote. And now I will show you some slides. Can we have the lights out? Yeah. I hope that my reading Is this a loudspeaker too? Or is a loudspeaker over there? I have it here. Good. I hope that my reading has given you a feeling of what kind of a human being Richard Neutra was. Only in 1927 was he given a chance to build. Now I would like to show you a few Kodochromes depicting what I consider Richard Neutra's unique contribution to 20th century architecture to be. Before I do this, I want to show you, however, two significant slides. Up to Neutra's last days, he remained amazed that although he was always outside the establishment, he could achieve world fame. May I have the lights in the projector? Let me see. He was the first architect to be featured on the cover. Oh, wait a minute. I have something. What's happening? He was the first architect who was featured on the cover of Time magazine in June 1949. Very few people know that he has written 10 books. His most important one is called Survival Through Design. When it was published in 1954, it meant a great deal to him that a Saturday Review, our most prestigious literary magazine, reviewed the book and put Neutra's portrait on its cover. Now to speak of what I consider some of Neutra's original contributions. Did you know, for instance, that he was the first architect in USA to detail and use a sliding glass door? Frank Lloyd Wright never used any in his buildings, and Schindler used canvas-covered doors in his own residence. Through his scientific readings, he became aware that the human species evolved millions of years ago in nature, and that most human beings are happy when they can be in contact with nature. And thus Neutra tried in all his buildings to give his clients an outlook into nature. Hence, he used sliding glass partitions to make a garden or a view more accessible. Let me show you a few examples, like this slide, which is in the house of my son Dion, or a slide overlooking the Hollywood Mountains. How pleasant to open the sliding door and jump into the pool. Or how pleasant to open a sliding door onto a balcony and look into the evening sky. Did you know that he was the first architect to use a light strip on the overhang to illuminate the landscape and do away with curtains? To make it possible for his clients to enjoy their garden also at night, he invented this glass trough on the overhang, used for the first time in 1933 in the VDL Research House. And here is an interior which shows how you can illuminate the landscaping outside and eliminate glass reflections on the inside if no other light source is turned on. Let me also show you a few slides showing the day view and the same view at night, like in this house of Warren Tremaine in Montecito. Here is a day view, and here is the same view beautifully illuminated at night. Here is a view of a house in West Germany near Frankfurt during the day. Watch the lamp hanging from the ceiling and see how it is reflected in various light glass portions at night. But not only residences interested him. I show you now his indoor-outdoor church in Garden Grove. This is a day view. Perhaps some of you have read about Reverend Schuller and his Hour of Power. He now reaches 2,500,000 people on 55 television stations every Sunday morning. The same church at night reflected in a pool. And the Tower of Hope, erected 10 years later, also is a lovely apparition. Here Dione Neutra was a project architect. Did you know that he was the first architect to use movable metal louvers in USA. A sensorial problem that interested him was that of controlling the glare and heat which fell upon a building as the sun shifted through the skies. He used these movable metal louvers for the first time in 1946 in the desert house for Edgar Kaufman, for whom Wright built his waterfall house in Bear Run, Pennsylvania. This is a day view, and this is a night view. Here you see these louvers installed in the roof porch and in the patio. It was the first use of this device on the North American continent. Then he used them again in the prize-winning Northwestern Insurance Building of 1950, which was soon imitated all over the country. The sheet metal man, who together with Neutra had worked out the design and mechanics, then founded the Lemler Company, started to advertise, and soon these louver installations were used all over the world. When Neutra and Alexander designed the Hall of Records, these louvers became monumental. In fact, 150 feet tall, and were controlled by an electric eye. Based on his scientific knowledge how glare affects the eyes, he was able to convince the County Board of Supervisors to allow him to construct these louvers through his convincing argument that glare from the side was more dangerous than glare from above, and that these kind of louvers diffuse the light in a physiologically acceptable way. At the same time, they reduce the load on the air conditioning system, thus saving money and protect the 2,000 workers behind the large glass front. Are you aware of the fact that he applied this reasoning 15 years ago, long before the energy crisis became popular? In his last major building, the Orange County Courthouse, now in association with Ramberg and Lowry, the louvers had a golden color which harmonized with the louvers of the police facility building built a few years earlier, also in collaboration with Ramberg and Lowry, Dione Neutra being the project architect. Here you see a view looking out, and here the edge of the louvers with the rear side of the courthouse in the distance. Here you see a detailed shot of these golden louvers. In 1933, Neutra built his own house, which is known as the VDL Research House, named in honor of a Dutch industrialist, Van der Leeuw, who loaned us the money to buy the lot and start on this venture in the middle of the Depression. 1963, this house burned down, as you can see in these two slides. As the protecting trees had burned too, Richard and Dione, who was the project architect on this house and had very much to do with its fine detailing and many design decisions, decided to use louvers also on this house. Here you see the front of the reconstructed VDL Research House, to which, besides the louvers, a roof porch was added. One way to play up the changes of the natural environment was to use an element which was a sensitive visual indicator of the changing breeze, water. Water became an important design consideration in nearly all the later designs. I will show you just a very few examples, like this house in Ojai, or the Marinas Medical Building in Newport Beach, where again louvers and water was used. It is another example how Neutra tried to put nature on center stage in all his designs. Here are two slides of the aforementioned Orange County Court building surrounded by a large water pool. He and Dione became very intrigued with water roofs, as you can see here in a residence built in West Germany in Wuppertal. By the way, it was in this residence that Mr. Neutra had his fatal heart attack. They also became intrigued with mirrors as an extension of space, as you see here on the roof of the VDL Research House that also has a water roof. Nature can be upstaged by very subtle oversights of design. Neutra felt that balustrades often interpose themselves between the viewer and the view in a disastrous way. He designed a water guard to keep the clients away from the balcony's edge, thus enhancing the view into the valley. This house in Richmond, Virginia was at that time the first modern residence in that state. Let me show you also a few other examples, like this house in the Italian part of Switzerland. This living room overlooks the Lago Maggiore. Can you imagine what a balustrade would do to this view, and what delight the owners derive when looking over the water guard, in which the clouds are mirrored? Or another house in the Swiss Alps. What would a balustrade do to this view in summertime or in wintertime? Here is a detail of the water guard, and here a view from the living room when on a clear day the famous Jungfrau Mountain is mirrored in the water guard. You may have noticed that I have mentioned several times the name of my son Dione, an undergraduate of USC. I feel that it has not been sufficiently recognized what his contribution to Neutra's architecture has been in the last 30 years. I will show you just a few examples of buildings on which Dione played a vital part when he was a project architect during the 10-year partnership with Robert E. Alexander, whom Neutra always highly esteemed. Here is a view of the Lincoln Memorial Museum on the Gettysburg battlefield. That was to house a huge painting of Pickett's charge. It also shows a water roof from which you can view the ancient battlefield. Here is a view of the Swilburne Library of Adelphi University in Long Island. You can see Neutra's shadow in the snow as he photographs. Again, louvers on the entrance front side, which features a pool too. Also an interior slide that shows a large mirror as extension of space. Now I want to show you father and son sitting together on the VDL Research House living room porch. I am very happy that Dione, who became his father's partner in his last year, is continuing the office and is also enthusiastic about the concept of nature near buildings. Here I show you a few slides of a recently completed residence in Tarzana, where he also uses large water bodies. Here is a view looking over the San Fernando Valley, and here a view looking towards the building. I also want to show you a slide of the library at Huntington Beach, which was completed in March 1974. It has a sculptural ramp that leads to the upper level. As the library is situated in a new park, Dione conceived the idea to put all the book stacks in the interior and have various reading platforms, informal sitting arrangements for the readers, with a lovely outlook into the park, the lake, and the water bodies surrounding the building. Now, as I'm nearing the end, I have a surprise for you, because I want to show you our wedding picture. 21 and 29 years of age, so innocent and unaware of what life had in store for us. Here we are nearly 50 years later, after we had stood by each other and had endured many hardships together. Now please turn off the light in the projector, and turn on the light again. I mentioned in the invitation you received, let me see. Oh, excuse me. I would like to read you now a few excerpts from my personal biography, 50 Years on My Toes. I will start with a letter that shows Neutra's... no, wait a minute. As you are not only students of architecture, but also young men or women who either are already married or may look forward to find a companion with whom to share your ideas, I want to read you now 3 letters from this biography, which I have called 50 Years on My Toes. I start with the last letter my husband wrote me before our marriage, December 1923, 4 years after we had met. Dear Dione, your mother will not be able to criticize my work, but she can believe in me like a mother believes in her own son, who can find mitigating circumstances for his failures outside of his possible incompetence. My wife shall above all fortify me and unequivocally let me feel that she knows the good which is in me and in my gifts. Nothing romantic, but something eternal. There are in our art only a handful of men who strive with a pure heart, and those one knows. There may also be a few unknowns like my friend Schindler. All else was created out of a spirit of speculation, a seeking for originality, dancing on one's head, or just imitating and changing examples of former periods. All these people have no ethical calling to be architects or teachers of human beings. I am modest and not a conceited fool. Above all, I know the limits of my gifts, or even more those of my interest for the daily worldly battle. My interest diminishes here very easily once my reasoning has convinced me at an example that my intellect is sufficient or more than sufficient. Perhaps I have more gifts to be a director of an enterprise than to be an entrepreneur on my own account. I am sure I could be one just like anybody else, but my predilection is not sufficient. The small tragedy of my life is already clearly delineated in soul and body, as it is in every human being, so it is with me. The time will probably come when I will feel that this early period may be the happiest one, even if in later periods I should be successful. Each success has to be bought with 1,000 negligences. But you should never feel neglected as long as I am engaged with my better self and his work. For this is your companion, and this shall be our common work. A man neglects his wife only when he makes love to another woman, when he sits in a club or in a cafe and gambles, when he is too much of a businessman or a bibliophile, and in all these endeavors does not integrate his own self where he could have aspired to something greater. A man with vision surely should love above all his inner path, because this is the highest he can give his beloved. Otherwise, he has made a present of glittering stones, keeping the real diamonds for himself. I hope to God, and he has to be our hope in this immense, mysterious black universe. Oh God, may these words not sound high and mighty and fly through the air like Spanish racehorses, but sound convincing in the last letter which I write to you, my beloved, as a bachelor. Here is my answer. Such a beautiful, meaningful last letter you have written me before our wedding. My heart is moved and full of happiness, but also fear. Happiness because I believe I can fully enter into your feelings and thoughts, full of fear that I may not always be able to do so, or that you may have thoughts and feelings which I may not be able to share with you. But, my beloved friend, I think I can say with a good conscience that you will not find another girl which sees her task as clearly as I see it. To fulfill one's own potentials, this you once told me, and I have never forgotten it, that I can keep your love best by keeping this always in mind, by helping you towards this goal, or at least never hinder you in it, I am quite aware of. I may perhaps forget it for hours because every person is a little selfish and I have my share of it. Every evening when I pray and think over the day's happenings, I will, however, examine myself to be sure that I have not hindered you in your task. I shall always remember that you are most happy also together with me when you have accomplished something in your art and have the feeling of achievement. That I was not able to understand you yet when I met you in 1919 should not surprise you. Imagine, I was only a girl of 18 and quite childish for her age in many respects. A girl who had never loved with her soul, had never tried to think herself into another human being. A girl who was admired by many, whom everybody treated with very friendly, who was proud and elated to make conquests. To love someone is easy. To really understand is much, much more difficult. I cannot tell you how inexpressively glad I am that I learned to know you before our marriage, because I might have lost your love or perhaps your confidence if I had understood you so little. You would have become accustomed to settle difficulties within yourself alone, and later on it might have been impossible or very difficult to regain lost confidence, surely the tragedy of many marriages, I believe. My dear Richard, I'm quite aware that our marriage can be a wonderful one, that I am a woman who could be envied if she is able to fulfill the task she sees in front of her. But to reach this goal, the path is a long one, and the devil may have a chance to set many traps. Let's never harbor resentment against each other. Let's discuss what seems unclear. On the other hand, there is not much to think about. After all, we love each other, and feeling with each other will accomplish more than much talk about it. The most important thing is to be clear about one's path and always try to find back to it, unquote. One of Neutra's fortunate traits, character traits, was a marvelous sense of humor. This helped him in ticklish conversations with clients, contractors, building department officials, and bankers. As my last letter, I want to read you the one which demonstrates this sense of humor. For many years we were very poor and had to buy all our clothing second-hand, or kind friends or family members would give us some. When Dione was 2 years old, my mother in Switzerland sent us a nearly new expensive suit. Neutra wrote her. It is unreal. It is improbable. And yet, here is a suit arrived. I stand on Dion's stool and look at myself in the mirror above the wash basin from the shoulders downward to half of my calves. Most of the day I remain in this position and try to turn this way and that way on Dion's stool in order to increase the circle of the observable, an inch and another inch, just like the astronomers who try to look around the corner through their telescopes in the hope to catch a glimpse of the unknown side of the moon. How shall I be able to see with my eyes what I look like from behind? However, I have trustworthy reports. Dione and Dione stand admiringly around me. Of course, their opinion could be blinded by the newness of the manifestation, but it is so soothing to be overestimated by one's inner circle. Dione and Dione look at me and overestimate my beauty. The suit fits my skeleton to a 1/16 of an inch, as tightly as if designed for it. Our imagination is taken prisoner by the unpenetrable mystery of its origin. Who produced this masterpiece? And who was the unfortunate wretch from whom this jewel was prematurely snatched away by an unlucky fate? Does he lie beneath the lawn? Did he end his life after a debacle at the stock exchange? While his wife and coterie abandoned him, while men with heavy footsteps approached to impound his Rolls Royce because no check had arrived for 2 months' installment payments. Oh, installment payments come due. The wheel of fortune whirls them upward and makes them paramount. On the whole, my wardrobe is enriched through memorable pieces. Here is a suit that belonged to a Spanish-Swiss scion of industry. Here one from the son of a father who is the founder of psychoanalysis. Here are 2 suits, a light and a heavy one by one of the fighters of West American natural medical methods. Here an overcoat that once belonged to an executive of Sweet's catalog, and a velour hat belonging to an architect who now always goes around hatless. Oh, I could continue to enumerate all these illustrious possessions, but when my questioning eyes are glued to this newest acquisition to find an answer in my face, they see only an unfathomable smile, an impenetrable wall of silence. Imagine for a moment a girl who, before she wants to bewitch someone, is in the habit to quickly daub her nose with a powder puff, because her nose happens to be too shiny. Now imagine that by some quirk of fate she could have a naturally unshiny nose. She would have to face a complete conversion. Well, that's how it is with me too. To whom it had become second nature to quickly daub the trousers over his knees with spittle in order to make them appear less shiny before meeting an important personage. In short, I have been, so to speak, thrown off my tracks by this certain turn of events. Through our literature, we have heard of black, dependable Negro chiefs that suddenly neglected their governing and reveled in coquetry through the height of a shiny top hat bestowed by a passing naturalist. I also am neglecting my work, may even become unfaithful to my wife in this suit, where Adolphe Menjou and other film stars pale beside me. If I top this appearance by shaving myself and donning a fresh white shirt, I really believe that I might become irresistible to most of the beauties parading on Hollywood Boulevard." Unquote. End of lecture. Any questions? Anyway, I would be interested to get a reaction from some of you, what you thought about it.
It's fantastic.
Good, I'm glad.
Thank you so much for coming to share your.
You are welcome. I hope it wasn't too long. Was it too long? Sure? Good. No. I'm never tired. Well, maybe I will read you something which pleased me very much. Do all of you know the name of Bruno Zevi? Bruno Zevi is a professor of architecture in Rome. He is a very renowned art historian. He is also the editor of a magazine called At.Neutra, and he just wrote me this. "My greatest interest is for the shaping of an architect, and 50 years on my toes. I have the feeling that the publication of the first book is almost urgent because too many young architects are looking for an indication. What can I do to have this book appear in Italian as soon as possible? I wonder whether publishing a part of it in Architectura, both in English and Italian, could help. If you think it could, well, I'm quite ready to devote an entire issue of the magazine to it." I don't have a publisher yet, so I don't know how long it will take until the book is published. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, honeycombs, they have a shelf back there with stacks and stuff.